in an effective way. And she said, our work, our relationships, and our lives succeed or fail one conversation at a time. The quality of your life and leadership is determined by the quality of your conversations. I read that and I thought, how all of us want to be successful. All of us want to have successful relationships, be successful at our jobs, in our families. But how many of us think that our success in life comes from the way that we speak? A lot of times we think, well, if I work really hard, or if I have enough intelligence, I'm going to be successful. But this communications coach and this leadership guru says the conversations that we have are what determines our success or our failure. And Jesus said the same thing. He said, by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Our words are very important, and that's why we're doing this series. It might seem like just a self-help type of series, and it is, but it's also a spiritual thing. The way that we speak is so important. If you think about it, when you work with people, you can have somebody who knows their job really well. You can have somebody who is very intelligent, has high degrees, and they just don't know how to communicate. Maybe they're gruff, maybe they're rude, maybe they take people for granted, and that person's success is going to be limited, even if they're intelligent, even with their degrees, because they don't know how to communicate. So that's why this series is so important. If you know somebody, invite them. We all know somebody. Invite them to this series. If somebody who doesn't normally come to Sunday school, tell them, you got to come. This is a good series, and it's not because of who's teaching it. It's because it's going to benefit your life. If you know how to have good communication, if you know how to have good conversations, you're going to be successful. We all know those people who we say, oh, I don't want a marriage like them. And it's not because they're poor, and it's not because they don't have good jobs, and it's not because of where they live. It's because of the way we see them talk to each other. Our words matter. In the first lesson last week, we talked about setting our sails, and the sails are the part of the ship. We're talking about sinking ships. The sails are the part of the ship that catch the wind, and when the wind blows, it helps them get momentum, and words give us momentum in life. Today, we're talking about steering through the storm. So, my kids were young. They were still in grade school at the time, and I had to run into town, and I had to pay a bill. So I was going to town. I was paying the bill. I hadn't been looking at the news or listening or anything. We lived way out in the country where we didn't get good service. I don't even know if we had cell phones at the time, to be honest. Probably not smartphones. So I had no idea there was a storm coming. I drove into town, and as I was driving back, all of a sudden, the sky got dark, and it started pouring rain. It was coming down. I could not see in front of the front of my car. I couldn't see the sides of the road. I had no idea where I was. And the wind started blowing, and there was a semi right next to me, and the semi started tipping, and I was so scared because I couldn't see. I couldn't control what was happening around me, and I couldn't control the winds that were blowing that truck. And it looked like the kids were crying. I pulled over. I said, we're going to sit under this underpass. Let's just hold hands and pray. Because I couldn't do anything about what was happening around me. And a lot of times in life, that's what we're in. We can't control the things that are going on around us. We like to think, well, if everything was great, I would be this person. But you can't control your spouse. You can try to control your kids, but if you figure out a way to do that, I'm sure any of the young moms or dads in here would appreciate that info, because I never figured out a way to control my kids. You can't control your job. You can't control your boss, your coworkers, your neighbors. There's nothing you can do to control that. But what you can control, what you do have power of, is your tongue. So today we're going to talk about steering through the storm. You can't control the storm, but how you react in that storm is very important. If we could turn to James chapter 3. This is usually a very familiar portion of Scripture. If you haven't heard it, you probably will hear it a lot by the end of this series. James chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 4 through 6. It says, "Look also at ships. Although they are so large and driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell." It's a little thing. When I was younger, I've shared, I kind of had a problem with my tongue. I would yell and I would get really mad. And my parents would always say, "You've got to control your tongue. Where there's no wood, the fire goes out." This says your tongue gets set on fire by hell. When you start to yell, when you start to lose control of what you say, you're being set on fire by hell. You're being used by the enemy. We're going to talk about that in one of our lessons, but today we're going to talk about the winds that happen around us and what we can do. You see, people, we've been pastoring for over 20 years, and people come and go out of our office. "Oh, our marriage, we need help, we need help." And so many times, do you know who it is who needs the focus of attention? Can anybody guess? Who needs the most attention when they come for marriage counseling? The other person. So, if you just fix my husband, if you just fix my wife, it's going to be good. We're going to be fine because they're not doing what I tell them to do and they're not listening when I scream at them. If you just fix my kids, then I'm not going to yell at them and call them names. If you just fix my work atmosphere, I'm going to be a good employee. It's always the other person. But the Bible says here that whole ship, if you think about a ship, if you've ever been on a whale watching boat, and I know that Vic has a ship, and he would know that when you turn, it's this little thing. It's a rudder, and you barely see it. It sticks in the water. You might see the top of it. It's a piece of wood. It's a piece of metal, fiberglass, whatever it might be. You don't really see it, but if it's not there, you know it. If it's broken, you know it. The rudder is absolutely one of the most important parts of a ship. And your tongue is one of the most important parts of your body because we need to learn to control it. The first thing is the rudder might be small, but it's very strategic. Your words are strategic. Have you ever been I never do this anymore. Ever. Actually, I tell my kids never use the words never or always because that's very rarely true. But when I was younger, only when I was younger, I would say things when I'd be in the middle of an argument with my husband, and it wasn't very nice. And I would be like, "Yes, but you made me mad. You wouldn't stop. You just kept telling me what I didn't want to hear." So guess what? I just let it go. And I just said, "You're good for nothing. You're just like your father. You're just like your mother." I said whatever came into my head because I didn't control my tongue. Your tongue is strategic. The way that you speak is strategic. And when you learn to think before you speak, when you learn to direct that rudder, your life is going to follow. If you get in the middle of a storm and the wind is blowing, do you know that that's actually better for the rudder? Because if there's no friction, if there's no resistance to that rudder, it has nothing to direct it. But as the waves are flowing, things turn a little faster in the midst of a storm. The rudder might be small, but it's strategic. The second thing about the rudder, who controls the rudder? Does anybody know? The captain of the ship. Whoever has that steering wheel, the steering wheel doesn't do much, except for it turns the rudder, and the rudder is what controls the ship. The captain controls the steering wheel. So if the captain's at the steering wheel, and somebody comes and says, "Hey, do you know that we're headed towards Finland and we're trying to get to Jamaica?" And he says, "Well, that's your fault. You should have done something different." Nobody on the ship's going to think it's anybody's fault but his or hers. If you're not getting where you want to be, don't blame the people around you. If you're not getting the relationships you want, don't blame the people around you. You need to learn to speak strategically. You need to learn to use your tongue. There are going to be lessons. We're going to talk about specific ways. But today we're just going to talk about how important your tongue is. How important your words are. With words, do you know every time you speak, you can either use a sword or a salve. You can take out a sword and you can wound. You never do anything right. I knew you were going to mess this up. This is the last time I'm going to trust you. Or you've taken out that sword, you've wounded. And we can all go back to moments where those words were spoken over us, right? We can all remember those words when they were said to us and the way that they wounded us. But we can also remember those times that somebody said, do you want to know why I learned how to make good spaghetti? It's very simple. I made spaghetti one time, and my mom said, "You're really good at making spaghetti, you know that? Guess what? You're probably going to get spaghetti if you come to my house because I'm really good at making it." Your words change people. Now, if my mom would have come and said, "Sweetie, maybe you just shouldn't make spaghetti again," you probably would never get spaghetti at my house. Because our words are important, and that might seem silly, but we have a lot of other things that are bigger than that have affected us in deeper ways than that. And we can blame anybody. Sometimes I have a child who works in customer service. Not a child, an adult child. And they're good at their job. They're really, really good at their job. But every once in a while, they will say, "I just said this." And we'll say, "You can't say that to people." Yeah, well, if they would have done this differently and if they would have done that differently, I wouldn't have had to say that. But that's not controlling our tongue. But we all do that. We all do that. And a lot of times we're looking around at everybody else and we're pointing fingers at everybody else when either we aren't speaking when we should or we're saying things we shouldn't. You see, sometimes if there is no rudder, that ship just gets tossed all over the sea. If there's no conversations, you just end up wherever the wind blows you. You might end up shipwrecked on the rocks because you are missing your rudder. If your rudder's broken and you turn it, it's not going to turn. Same result. You're going to end up in shipwreck. You're going to end up at the bottom of the sea. If your words aren't being used correctly and you're saying the wrong things and you're missing the point and you're not taking responsibility for your words, you're going to end up in shipwreck. Even though the storm is raging all around us, even though the wind is blowing and the waves are crashing in, the steering happens with the rudder. Even when you're in an argument, even if you're in a relationship, and you guys know me, I'm not saying stay in relationships that are going to be dangerous for you. But even if you're in a relationship where you just can't seem to get along, maybe you should start looking here. Start steering your ship. Start practicing good conversations and good words. I've said this before. One of the best pieces of advice I got as a wife is speak what you want him to be over him until he becomes that. If your husband is the messiest person in the world, women, every time they pick up their socks, you just say, "Thank you so much. I'm so thankful that you clean up your socks. You are such a clean and neat person." Well, don't lie. We won't do that. My husband's a very neat person, and I can focus on the little things that he doesn't do or he does that I don't like. There's one thing that bugs me. It's when he starts the dishwasher and there's like 5 dishes in the dishwasher. And do you know why that bothers me? Because then I have to unload the dishwasher to put more things in there. But there are some women whose husbands never do anything around the house. So I have to tell myself, thank you for having such a good husband. Thank you so much for helping me around the house. Could you please not start the dishwasher with 5 dishes, though, because I want to keep putting dishes in the dishwasher. We need to learn to speak gratefulness to each other. When you stop guarding your words, you lose control of your tongue. When you stop guarding your words, you lose control of your relationships. When you stop guarding your words, you lose control over your walk with God. Because if you're being negative in any place in life, it's going to creep in and take over every part of your life. When I'm ungrateful about my husband, I become ungrateful about my kids. I become ungrateful to God. But when I learn to steer and I'm going to say this right now, this is all leading into November. And we did this a couple years ago. We're going to be able to practice everything that we've learned because in November, we're going to do a challenge called No Negativity November. So we're going to practice the whole month of November, being grateful, saying positive things, and your husband, your wife, your kids, your friends are going to get to say, is that negative? Should you be saying that? Oh, dear. Oh, dear. See, the thing is, when the storm around us is raging, when everything is going on that is out of our control, we have to keep speaking peace. When everything seems like it's falling apart, we have to keep speaking positivity. We have to keep speaking the things that we want to happen. In fact, Scripture says that the Lord spoke those things that weren't as though they were, and that's how it came into being. Words are important. Words are powerful. What we say has control over where we end up. We need to keep speaking life into the relationships that seem like they're dying. We need to keep speaking joy into situations that feel like they're nothing but despair. And we need to learn how to speak victory when it seems like everything else is falling apart. We can't sit in the middle of a battle and sit in the middle of something that's trying and say, oh, my word, everything's so bad, I just don't think I can do it this time. I've seen it. People have come and said, this time I'm not going to make it through. And they don't. Because they turned that rudder, and that's where their ship ended up. This time, I don't think my marriage is going to survive this argument, and it doesn't. I don't think my kids are going to live for God after this, and they don't. See, what we say is important, and we might not think in that little moment that it matters, but we're speaking it into the universe. And do you know what the devil is called in the book of Revelation? He's called the accuser of the brethren. So you know what he does is he picks that little accusation up, and he's like, oh, yeah, you think your husband's a loser? Guess what? You're a loser. You're a loser. You're a loser. You're a loser. And he beats them up with it over and over and over and over. Even the words we whisper to ourselves, I can't do it. I messed up again. I might as well give up. You know how many times I have said that to myself? I tried, I've told you before, when I was a kid, I lied. Oh, man, I lied about just dumb stuff. And I'd be like, God, I'm never going to lie again. I'm never going to lie again. I'm never going to lie again. And I'd go out and I'd be like, oh, yeah, guess what happened? And I'd lie. And I'd go home, I'd be like, I'm just a loser. And you know what the devil would do? Yeah, you're right. You are. You might as well give up living for God. You might as well just stop trying. You might as well just give in to all of those other temptations that you have because you're never going to be good for anything. Who do you think you are as a pastor's wife? Who do you think you are as a mom? Who do you think you are telling somebody how to live their life? You know how you live. And when you speak those things to yourself, the devil is going to beat you up with it. We all need a good dose of conviction. But we do not need a good dose of condemnation. See, you control the rudder. You decide what you speak. You decide the way you respond. When your spouse comes in and they're mad, they just got up on the wrong side of the bed. Sometimes my husband, this perfect man, gets up on the wrong side of the bed. And when he comes in and he says, well, nobody's doing any work around here, I can just start spouting all sorts. Well, what did you not do? Look what I did. I did this and this and this and this. And I can start to yell back. I can start to think, well, he's controlling my wind. He's controlling my rudder. Don't give people that power. You have the power to decide where are you going to go. In the middle of an argument, do you know, there's many times either one of us will say, oh, in the middle of an argument, okay, what's the point? How are we going to solve this? Trying to bring it back to what matters. When you're speaking with people and you let them decide the tone of the conversation, you're letting your ship be sailed wherever they want to take it. When you're at work and the enemy and your boss is saying all sorts of stuff and you let that get into your spirit and you go out and you start yelling at everybody else that you're the boss of, you're letting your boss control your spirit. The third thing is the ship follows the rudder. The thing about a rudder is, like I said before, the more resistance, the faster it turns. But sometimes you can turn that rudder, and you can be going, and it depends on your speed. But if you're going real fast and you turn the rudder, it can take a little while for your ship to start to turn. And so let's say that you've been in a relationship or you've been in a pattern of speaking that's been toxic for a long time. When you start to turn that rudder, it's not everything's going to change right away. When I first started to try to take down the way that I spoke to my husband, and I started trying to be very strategic in the way that I spoke, he didn't always trust that that's what I was doing. We had this pattern of me speaking in ways and him speaking in ways, and us just colliding anytime that there was a conflict. And we had to learn to trust each other. So when you turn that rudder, don't think, okay, well, I'm going home today, and I'm going to speak positive things, and you go to work tomorrow, and you say, good morning, life is wonderful, everything's great, and everybody at work is like, oh, yay, it's going to be a good day now because Michelle came with a positive attitude. It's not how it works. It's little by little by little. You start to turn things around by the way that you consistently speak. And when you mess up, the only way to make it right is to go back and say, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoken like that. I'm really working at not, but will you please forgive me? And man, if nothing will stop you from talking that way again, that humility of having to go and say, will you please forgive me? I shouldn't have said that. It's going to make me think again because I don't like having to be vulnerable like that. Maybe I'm alone in that, but I don't like having to say, hey, I really messed up and I need your forgiveness. The ship will follow the rudder. Galatians 6, verse 9. It says, and let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Eventually, you keep planting seeds of joy. You keep planting seeds of peace. You keep planting seeds of positivity. You keep doing the things that are important, and you're going to grow those plants in your garden. You're going to grow the results of those words in your relationships. I preached a few months ago about the suddenly and how suddenly something happens, but that suddenly is always in the works in the background. We don't know when our suddenly is going to happen. But we're preparing for a suddenly in the meantime. That's what our words are doing. No relationship suddenly breaks up. No job suddenly says, I can't even handle this anymore, you're fired. No kid suddenly says, I'm done, I can't take it anymore, I'm moving out, and I don't want anything to do with you. Those things happen one seed at a time. One negative conversation at a time, one angry moment at a time, one moment where we say, I'm going to indulge in what I want instead of taking guard of my spirit, taking guard of my heart and my mouth. But as we start to do those things that bring about the change, don't get tired. Don't get weary. Don't give up. Keep doing it until you see the change, because you will. You will see the change, I promise you. And if you need a partner to say, hey, can you be my cheerleader? Can you just keep cheering me on? Because right now when I go home, I'm faced with a lot of anger. Right now when I go home, there's a lot of chaos. So my tongue gets away from me. So I need you to tell me it's going to change. It's going to be okay. Get one. Get a partner. Get somebody who can keep you accountable. The next thing is a damaged or a broken rudder means no control. When you have learned a bad pattern of speaking, when you've practiced a bad pattern of speaking, I've seen homes where parents talk so despicably to each other. And then you hear the kids on the playground, And they're talking so mean to each other. And when I'm at the playground with the little kids, I hear that some kids, and I think, when my kids were little, I would get really upset. I'd be like, oh, that child? He's a demon. How dare he speak to my kids that way? Now I hear them and I think, oh, that poor child. What does he hear at home? What does she listen to day in and day out to have so much hurt inside that little tiny body? When you have learned a bad pattern of speaking, when you have learned habits of speaking harshly and letting anger control you, you're going to end up in shipwreck. There's no way. You cannot control what happens around you at that point. You see, good marriages don't just happen because two people got married with the best intentions, or everybody would have a good marriage. I don't know one person who got married and said, I take that back. I know one person who said, I know this is my first marriage. I'm going to be divorced soon. But that's not what most people go into marriage thinking. Most people go into marriage thinking, this is my forever love. We are going to hold hands and skip through the park. We are going to go on dates every night by candlelight and dance in the moonlight. And when the rain comes, we're going to open up our umbrellas and just dance through that. We all think that when we get married. I remember thinking, I'm the luckiest person in the world. I married the most handsome man, and he's smart, and he's funny. And then a few months down the road, I thought, are you the same person, or did they switch you after the wedding? Because you're not as nice as I thought you were, or as cute, because you're mean. Nobody goes into marriage thinking it's going to be awful, but all of us have to. Once we're in that marriage, once we're in a relationship, a friendship with our children, whatever it might be, we have to decide, what are you going to put in this? I tell my kids when they start a relationship, you've got an empty basket, and you get to decide what goes in that. You want to speak anger? You're going to get anger. You want to speak mean? You're going to get mean. You want to call names? That's what you're going to end up with. But if you are gracious and you are patient and you learn to forgive, that's what you're going to grow out of that basket. But you get to put in whatever you want. If you fill the basket with all the crud that you learned that's bad, you have no control. See, I do have control of my marriage. He doesn't know this. I have control of my marriage. I get to choose. Do I want it to be crazy and angry, or do I want it to be calm and peaceful? Do I want it to be a place where good words are spoken to each other? I can't control what he's going to say to me. I can't control what you're going to say to me. But I can control how I respond. And here's the thing about the rudder. Psalm 19:14. The rudder works best when it's been properly aligned. If the rudder is out of alignment, you can be steering it, but the rudder's not turning the right way, you're still not going to get where you want. Our rudder has to be properly aligned. In Psalm 19:14, King David said, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer." See, the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart. What comes out of my mouth is what has been my heart's dwelling, the things that I've been meditating on. If I'm sitting in my bed at night and I'm thinking, man, my husband was so rude today. Yep, he thinks he's the best husband in the world, but let me tell you something. He's got another thing coming. He didn't do this. He said this wrong. He spoke this way to the children. And all I'm thinking about is everything bad. Guess what's coming out of my mouth? When he taught, and you're lying if you say this never happens, ever, ever. Or you've only been married a short time or never been in a relationship with anybody for a long period of time. Eventually, I can sit there and I can think, he just thinks he's so perfect. And then he speaks and I'm like, ugh. That's my reaction because the meditation of my heart has been wrong. If I can, have you ever heard somebody say something to you that you think, that just seems really insincere? I know this isn't true. So this person came to me and they were very sweet. They just were a really sweet person. But in Worthington, I had led worship, and it was after church, and somebody came to me, and they're like, Sister Baumann, I love it when you sing. You have the most beautiful voice in the whole world. I could listen to you for hours. And I'm like, oh, my goodness, flattery. Okay, I know that's not true. It was very sweet, but sometimes people say things to you that you know they don't feel that in their heart. They're just flattering you, but inside they're really actually a little bit angry at you or a little bit bitter towards you. And it always shows in the way that we speak because our words are not aligning with our heart. And eventually, guess what? It still comes out. We have to align our words correctly. We have to align our hearts correctly. I learned a long time ago, I try so hard to have good words and not say the things that I shouldn't say. And I told my husband years ago, the problem isn't my words. The problem is my heart. I think about all the negative things, and I think about all of the things people do wrong, and I think about all of these critical things because everything in my life is about, okay, how can we make this better? How can we make this better? How can we make this better? And I've just learned to criticize everything. My heart has to learn to be thankful. I have to teach and train my heart to be positive, and the only way to do that is to align it with the Lord. Because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, Matthew 12:34. We talked about this a few weeks ago. We can say, I don't know where that came from. And I've had people say, I don't even know why I said that to you. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's okay. I forgive you. It's fine. And I'm thinking, well, I know why you said that to me, because that's what you've been thinking about. That's what you've been dwelling on. If our heart is not aligned correctly, our mouth will not follow it. It's not enough to change your vocabulary. You have to change your heart towards God. You have to allow God to take your heart and all of the pain and all of the wounds that we've had in the past, and we have to allow Him to let us forgive and put that down at His feet and help us to have a right heart before Him so that our words can follow. When the heart and the tongue work together, have you ever been around those people who you're just like, I just really like to be around them? They'd never talk back. I just was talking about somebody, and I think this would be one of the best compliments I could receive. I was just talking about somebody that I grew up with, and I said, she's just a really great person. I never hear her say anything negative about a person. And there are people who around her will say something negative, and we can say, well, I don't gossip, but I just got caught up in it because everybody around me was doing it. She doesn't. She's just quiet. See, we do have control. And when our heart's aligned with God and we say, God, I don't want to join the devil in accusing the brethren, we're not going to, because our heart's aligned correctly. But out of alignment speech will always bring friction. Out of alignment speech will always cause more chaos. And it is not, I'm going to repeat this until I'm done in the next 5 minutes. It is not the other person's fault. It is not the other person's responsibility. It's not your bosses. It's not your children's. It's not your spouses. It's not your neighbors. I'm not saying this in a sense of pride at all, but a few months ago, I had been out on our balcony, and my dog was getting potty trained, and he had gone out there and he had peed on the balcony. And so I went out there to try to wash it off. I don't want my balcony to smell like urine, so I went out there to wash it off, and I was trying to be careful not to let the water drip below, but some of it must have dripped. And my neighbor came up and knocked on the door, and I'm really sweet. I answer the door, and she says, you're dripping water on my balcony. I said, oh, no, I'm so sorry. She's like, well, it's all over my son's bike. And I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was trying to clean off my deck. And she's like, well, it's getting everywhere. And I'm like, I've apologized 3 times. What's your issue? I'm like, well, I said, I'm sorry. And she's like, okay, thank you. And I said, yep. And I closed the door and walked away. Do you know what the Lord did to my heart? He convicted me. What if that woman needs me? Not me, him. What if that woman really was a connection to invite her to church or have a Bible study, and you just ruined your witness? That's not a proud moment, and that's a time that I let the storm around me determine how I spoke. Now, I can justify that however I want. I was really nice in the beginning. I really was. But when she wasn't nice to me, I felt justified to say something I should not have said, act in a way I should not have acted. But we do that. We use excuses. Well, you don't know what it's like to be married to her. And you know what? I don't. Thank God. But you are married to her, so you need to find a way to talk to her with grace. And what does the Bible say about a husband's responsibility? Love your wife as long as she's lovable, because that's how Christ loves the church. It's not what it says. It says, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. And wives, respect your husbands as long as they're a good man. Respect your husbands, because this is what we're commanded to do. Not based on their merit, but based on who you are. Because your words will always show where your alignment is. If you think it's okay to walk around and talk to people however you want, and I hear people do this. Sometimes I'm out and I hear just this off the cuff comment that I think, I wonder how you would like to be talked to like that. I wonder how you would like it if somebody said it that way to you. I always think there's a nicer way to be able to say things. I don't always say the nicer thing, but I always think there's a nicer way you could say that. The way you speak will always show where your heart is aligned. And in that moment, my heart, where I answered the door, my heart was aligned with me. My heart was aligned with my feelings. My heart was aligned with what I wanted. And to be honest, my heart was aligned with my own pride because she hurt my pride. I'm nice, and I'm a good neighbor, and you should just be lucky to have me. Imagine if you had some people up here who had kids who jumped around all day. But this is the thing. Proper alignment brings power. See? If my husband wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, I don't have to have a bad day. That's power. If my husband is a mean, nasty person, I can still be a kind and gentle person, and that's power. If your wife is an angry hurricane who comes in, we were on the phone with a friend the other day, and he said, have you heard about Hurricane Jerry? And I'm like, no, but your wife has told me about him. That's their name. If your wife is a hurricane who comes in angry and yelling all the time, you have the power to quiet that storm, because proper alignment is power. Let's all stand. The rudder doesn't remove the storm. A proper alignment doesn't remove the storm. It simply decides whether you're going to get to your destination or not. It simply indicates whether or not you're going to end up in shipwreck or in power. Hopefully over the next few weeks, we're going to learn some techniques and we're going to learn some things that are going to help us speak the way that we're supposed to speak and bring power into our relationships. And like I said at the beginning, if you know somebody who doesn't come here for Sunday school, invite them, because this is a good series. It's a practical series. It's a series that you can learn from and you can improve with. So invite them. But it's simply, your words are simply a way to get to the other side of the storm. You will go through it, but you'll be on the other side. I've seen marriages who have faced things that they thought, I don't know how we're going to get through this, but we're going to buckle down and we're going to do the work, and they make it through. And then I see marriages that are going through much less than that, or the same thing as that marriage was going through, and they don't make it because of the way they speak about each other. When my husband messes up, I need to give him the same grace that I want him to give me, regardless of if he does or not. I need to give him the same grace. And when my brothers or my sisters mess up, I need to extend the same grace that I need them to extend to me when I mess up. When I answer the door to you the way I answered the door to my neighbor, I need your grace. And when you come in and you have an attitude towards me, I need to extend that grace. Our words are so important. And when people come in and they hear us speaking kindly, they say, hey, this is a place I want to be. But if they come in and we're not talking to each other at all, or we're speaking rudely to each other, hey, you're in my way, get out of the way. What are you doing there? Whoa, okay, I guess you're just going to own the whole room there. It's rude. We don't need to talk like that because people out there get that all the time. They need to get something different in the house of the Lord. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much for giving us an example of how we can speak and what we should say. I pray, Lord, today that you would help us this week. Remind me when I'm speaking in ways that are rudderless and when I'm allowing the storms and the situations around me to control how I speak. Remind me, God, that I need to align my heart properly so that your words flow out of me. Not my words and not my attitudes and not my desires, but yours, Jesus. I pray, God, today that you would bless each one here and that you would bless the service that's coming. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, you're dismissed, and we will start in about 20 minutes.